Today, a New York court rejected a bid to grant personhood to chimpanzees in the state and free them from captivity. If authorized, it would have been a first-of-its-kind legal victory for animal rights in the U.S. The group who pushed for the lawsuit, the Non-Human Rights Project, believes that animals deserve all the legal rights that humans do, as does my next guest, Gary Francione, an animal abolitionist, lawyer, and professor at Rutgers University. He was the first person to ever teach an animal rights theory class, and he's been changing the conversation about sentient creatures ever since. Gary joined me earlier, and I first asked him to explain to me what animal abolition is.
Animal abolition is the theory that we ought not to be focusing on the treatment of animals, that the fundamental moral question is, can we justify using animals at all, however humanely we treat them? I mean, I think that we have to confront the fact that because animals are chattel property and they have no inherent or intrinsic value, they have only extrinsic and external value, the standard of animal welfare is actually very low. So even if you take the most humane places in terms of the way animals are treated, it's still really horrible. And so basically I'm trying to change the conversation away from treatment and over to use. Sort of ask the fundamental question, why are we eating, wearing, or using animals at all, particularly when we don't have to? So that would sort of be the answer in a nutshell.
What's your response to the concept that humans are cognitively different than other animals?
No, I mean, we are the only animals who use symbolic communication. So, what goes on in our heads basically is very, very much connected with this thing called language and these concepts that we get from the language that we use. So I have no doubt that that animals are cognitively different from us. But the question is, so what? I mean, yes, they're cognitively different, but they're sentient, they're perceptually aware, they're subjectively aware. So why do we think that the cognitive differences matter morally? I mean, we can see this when we're talking about human beings. I mean, you can say, well, you've got somebody who's mentally disabled and somebody who's brilliant. Are they different? Yes. Are the differences relevant? They may be. But it depends what question you're asking. If the question is, you're going to hire somebody to be a math professor, you probably don't want to hire somebody who is mentally disabled. On the other hand, if the question is, whom do you use, the talented mathematician or the person who is disabled, who do you use for a painful biomedical experiment or as a forced organ donor? The answer is you shouldn't use either of them if that's the question. So, I mean, that's really, I mean, cognitive differences matter in certain respects, but the cognitive differences don't matter when you ask the question, can you justify treating a sentient being exclusively as a resource? It doesn't really matter. The cognitive differences are irrelevant more.
PETA, I have to bring this up, one of the largest animal advocacy groups, apparently slaughters animals en masse. According to Huffington Post in 2011, the organization killed 96% of the animals brought to them. Gary, what sort of groups can we trust to lobby on behalf of these voiceless creatures if even PETA is mass slaughtering them?
Well, look, I know the folks at PETA. I've known them for many years, and I'm sure I don't wish to question anyone's integrity. I disagree with I mean, in certain ways, Abby, PETA takes the position that killing an animal painlessly is not harming the animal. And as crazy as that may sound, it really is sort of part of the conventional thinking that we have about animals. It goes back a few hundred years ago to 19th century England, when you had thinkers like Jeremy Bentham who said, well, animals matter, they can suffer, but they don't care that we use them. They only care about how we use them. And so the cow doesn't care that we eat her. She only cares about how we treat her. Now, I think that that's wrong. I think that's a speciesist notion of self-awareness and interest in one's life. But you know what? I think most people believe that, Abby. I think most people think, well, yeah, it's all right to kill animals as long as you treat them okay. Now, I don't think we do treat them okay, but I think that fundamental moral question, this idea that it's all right for us to use them as long as we treat them well, is morally wrong. And so I think that what you see with PETA, and this is just one of, I think, many problems with PETA in terms of its killing of animals, a fairly high percentage of the animals it takes in at its Norfolk facility, it reflects the idea that, well, if you kill the animal painlessly, you're not really harming the animal. And again, it's always good to take these things and put them in human context. If I kill you, it's better that I don't torture you first. But even if I sneak in, in the middle of the night and shoot you in a way that you don't feel anything, I've still harmed you. I mean, I haven't harmed. It would be worse if I caused you pain, but by taking your life, I've harmed you. Same thing that applies to animals.
Exactly. Yeah, the humane way to murder someone, I guess.
Right.
I wanted to bring up another contentious story, which I saw that you wrote about, that sparked a viral debate about the legal animal hunting in South Africa. Of course, Melissa Bachman, TV show host, posted that photo of her on Twitter, boastfully, sitting next to the slaughtered lion. Why do you think people reacted so viscerally to this photo as opposed to other stories of animal abuse and suffering going on every day?
I actually got threats by email from that story. People got very upset with me about that story. Look, I think that people fetishize certain animals, and we romanticize about lions and elephants and creatures like that. So this woman shows up and she shot a lion, and people thought that I was defending that. I wasn't defending it. What I was saying is, those of you who are criticizing it, who eat animals or wear animals, why are you criticizing what she's doing? I agree she shouldn't shoot the lion, but I don't really see a lot of difference between shooting the lion and going to the supermarket tonight and buying a dead animal in a styrofoam package, where that animal's probably actually had a worse life than the lion had until Melissa Bachman shot the lion. But so I really, it's sort of like Michael Vick. I mean, that's all these things are variants. I call them the variations on the Michael Vick theme. Everybody gets upset with Michael Vick. Everybody, people still, and this happened in 2007, people still hate Michael Vick because he was involved in dogfighting in some property he had, I believe, in Virginia. And my view is, look, why do we get upset about what Michael Vick did? Because we get upset that he inflicted suffering and death on animals for no good reason. His only reason was entertainment. He enjoyed it. But the bottom line is, what's our justification for killing 58 billion land animals a year and probably 1 trillion sea animals? What's our justification? We don't need to eat animals to be optimally healthy. Indeed, a lot of mainstream healthcare people are saying that eating animals is detrimental to your health, but nobody's maintaining you need to eat animals. And animal agriculture is an ecological and environmental disaster.
It is. And I have to jump in here really quick because I think you're hitting on the crux of a really important issue here, which is this severe detachment from, food to table. And which really brings us to factory farming, because as you're saying, the lion, the dog, having Michael Vick have these dogs fighting each other, and it's really hits close to people who do not see where their food comes from. Today, a really graphic video came out exposing the horrific treatment of dairy cows in the DiGiorno pizza factory, where the workers are just blatantly torturing these animals. I mean, is this type of treatment an outlier or the norm when it comes to factory farming?
I understand that a lot of these organizations like to have these exposés and sort of talk about the abuses, but the bottom line is if the dairy farm were working perfectly well and there weren't any of these, quote, abuses, end quote, it'd still be a horrific process. I mean, the animals have to be kept pregnant constantly. Their babies are taken away from them almost immediately after birth. It's the veal industry. I mean, that's what happens to all the male calves. They end up as veal. And I think there's as much suffering and death in a glass of milk as in a pound of steak. You can't really draw a morally coherent distinction between flesh and dairy products. And so even if the dairy products are produced, quote, humanely, end quote, it's still horrible. And again, it gets us back to the basic issue. If you don't have to kill to live, if you don't have to engage in violence, if we really do take nonviolence seriously, I mean, this is really the basic point. If you really take nonviolence seriously, and it's not just, talk, if it's sincere and you believe it, why would you kill when you don't have to? And this is the thing, and I think, Abby, that people really, I am seeing a real change in terms of how people respond to this activity, to this issue. I think a lot of people are recognizing that you really can't distinguish between the dog you love and the cow that you're eating.
Philosophically, you're hitting on some really fundamental points here, Gary, but humans have evolved eating meat You know, right now we're talking about a wasteful culture. I'm talking about 40% of the food is completely wasted here. The U.S. eats the second most meat per capita in the entire world. How do we even begin to scale back this enormous waste and begin to kind of expand consciousness about this issue when it's so entrenched?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You're right. It is, and you're right. But I also think that many people are becoming aware of the ecological costs of animal foods. And it's not just a question of factory farms. I mean, the bottom line is you can't produce animal foods for the number of people who want animal foods without having factory farms. And even if you tidy them up and you get rid of what these groups call the worst abuses, it's still horrible. But, you know, I think even if you don't care about animals, there are important human rights issues here. I mean, it takes between 6 and 12 pounds of plant protein to produce 1 pound of flesh. It can take hundreds, thousands of times more water to produce a pound of flesh than a pound of potatoes or wheat or something. And the bottom line is that, you know, we're feeding huge amounts of grain to animals that we're going to slaughter, that if we took that grain, we could basically feed the world. I mean, even if you don't care about animals, there are profound human rights issues here. And when you said at the outset of your question, we've evolved eating meat. Well, you know, some of us have, and you know, there's quite a bit of dispute about how we evolved and what we evolved eating. But the bottom line is, look, we've evolved doing lots of things. We've evolved being relentless sexists. The idea that, you know, when you're making a decision as to what you're going to eat tonight, that there's some sort of conflict between you and the cow or you and the chicken, the answer is no, that's not true at all. You're just making a choice. And if your choice is basically informed by nothing more compelling than palate pleasure, then I question, you know, whether you really are committed to nonviolence or whether you really take morality seriously.
Gary, we only have about a minute left, but almost everything is made from animal products, or at least it seems that way. If one does not want to support this industry, what are some small steps that they can take without going completely vegan from the onset? Because I know that's a huge leap for a lot of people.
Well, you know, I think we need to start thinking differently about it, that it's not that big of a leap. Fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts are great for you. You know, they're easy to get. A vegan diet is actually cheaper than a diet with animal products. But what I would say is, look, you can do it. It's easy to go vegan immediately. But if you don't want to, my recommendation is go vegan for breakfast for a week or two. When you see that your arms and legs don't fall off, you know, then try, you know, vegan for lunch for a week or two, and then vegan for dinner. When you buy shoes next time, don't buy leather. You know, avoid wool. I mean, wool is hard. You know, really involves you know, a lot of suffering on the part of the sheep. We can avoid all this stuff, and if we stop, the most important thing is that if we stopped eating them, then you know, our whole moral compass, our whole moral focus would change. That's the problem. The problem we eat is that we eat them. We relate to animals. Most of us relate to animals when we're consuming them as food. Once we stop doing that, our whole sort of perception changes about these things.
Thank you so much. Incredible insight, Gary Francione, lawyer, professor, Rutgers University. Amazing to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me.